what really happened before Megxit.
People go, I don't actually care about the royals, and then they'll go, but that Meghan.
She was an independent, working, very successful woman in her own right that then had to fit into this system, and not just fit in, but fit in within a position.
And was she a bully, or was she bullied?
I had heard about the bullying long before the story broke.
They said, just you watch, Meghan and Kate will be pitted against each other publicly.
And why is Kate such an enigma?
Kate is this extraordinary player of the long game, which is the thing that works within the royal system.
Did Kate want to be famous? Would Kate have been famous in any other circumstance? That probably wasn't where she wanted to be.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Talking Royal Summer Series. We're going to be joined today by the wonderful journalist Catherine Mayer. Thank you so much for coming in. You've got this incredible book, Divide and Rule, which I'll hold up there. That's Divide and Rule. And the whole point of the book is it's looking at female members of the royal family through history and the battles that they have faced. Where I want to start with is Meghan. Mm-hmm. Because I would say she is and has been for quite a time one of the most talked about members of the royal family before she officially became a member of the royal family and afterwards. I mean, as you both know, anytime we talk about Meghan on this show, what kind of reaction do we get, Chris?
I'd say some of it is positive and a lot of it is negative. So there's never any areas of grey when it comes to commentary on Meghan.
They are incredibly divisive, Harry and Meghan. Anything they do has very polarising opinions around them. People either really love them or they really hate them, and they really like to talk about that at quite loud volumes on social media. So whatever you post does attract a lot of feedback.
You could call them the Marmite of the royal family.
You could because Marmite is marketed as you either love it or you hate it. And they are polarising and divisive mainly because we live in a culture that has put great effort into making them so.
Yes. And pitting, for example, one woman up against another. Like
we're talking
Kate
about media. It's
Meghan.
the media.
Yeah.
It's the narrative.
We're talking about mainstream media. We're talking about new media. And we're also talking about organised disinformation campaigns, not just around them, but around all the royals. So one of my purposes with this book is to say to people, because another thing that happens, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is people go, you know, I don't actually care about the royals. And then they'll go, but that Meghan.
Yes.
You know, but there's a whole sort of a misapprehension about monarchy as being a kind of tourist attraction. And of course, it's got a lot more power and heft, and not just in this country, but, you know, head of state in 15 nations. That's not chopped liver.
No, not at all. But it started off so well with Meghan, the positivity and the way that, I mean, the media talked about her in some quarters in a really awful, disrespectful way at the very start. But she did come with a lot of hope, and all three of us were at the royal wedding, and I know how much hope and positivity it gave me to see her coming down in the carriage at the long walk, to the point where I was almost lost for words, because in this ball of one person there was so much that could come from this one person being within the royal family. As a black woman myself, it made a massive difference to me to see her, and then suddenly there was this switch.
Yes. Yeah.
And in it you call it Planet Windsor because of its absurdity. And we've talked before about the allegations, Lizzie, about Meghan bullying members of staff within royal households. And you know where I stand on that. Like, you know, I just sort of say I refuse to believe there hasn't been a single member of the royal family who hasn't at some point in time been mean to a servant or an aide at some point. But we've talked about this before in the way that was used as a reason for people to continue to turn on her.
It's interesting, isn't it? When did that moment happen? And we did. You know, you look back at the wedding and what a happy, glorious day that was. Those early engagements that she did. I think both of us often look back to those days and think about when she was involved in the Hub Community Kitchen with the women from Grenfell Tower, and what an amazing project that was, and also how brilliant she was. She sort of stood up there, no notes, giving these really brilliant speeches, didn't she? And we both were like, wow, this is really impressive. And then suddenly everything began to slightly fall apart and turn. And I can't really remember what that moment was.
What particular moment?
But it did go from one to the other quite quickly.
So what did happen then, Catherine? That's something you do really you do a deep dive into that in this book.
I do. And I mean, I don't know whether any of you have ever had sort of problems with bullying in an institution. I actually have, and also harassment. And one of the things that I took away from that, and this is sort of a long time ago, but I took away from that the question, but what did the institution do to answer those allegations? And one of the things that I say in the book, I talk about the ways in which I had heard about the bullying long before the story broke. So there was a very, the allegations of bullying.
To be clear, this is Meghan bullying, isn't it? Not Meghan being bullied.
No, about her bullying. I began to hear that, and it was interesting that I was hearing it because I wasn't at that stage intending ever to write or do anything again about the royals. So people weren't telling me that because they wanted it to get out. Right. They were telling me that because they thought it wouldn't get out. And, they were friendly and they wanted to vent. But so it's not that there were not tensions. There absolutely were. But my question is, how did the institution let this go on so long without taking appropriate action, whatever that action might be, whatever was really going on? And also then the decision for them to let that become public right at the same time as the Meghan and Harry sit down with Oprah Winfrey, absolutely made it look like the whole thing was trumped up, and also put it into a phase where if you believe that there were people who were bullied who needed some kind of protection, A, they weren't protected at the time, and B, it made it impossible for any kind of public accountability to take place, because those people would have had their lives ruined by being, exposed to public gaze as her accusers, if you like. Yes. And I mean, there are some names out there, but there are a lot that aren't. And what I would say is, I think that there were a whole set of kind of cultural rifts and clashes, and there was. We all know that the palace is entirely capable institutionally of being dusty and having racism in its corners and being this Planet Windsor place that I talk about where the rules are just different. It's a lot to ask somebody to come in there
and to immediately adapt to.
And I mean, most.
I was just going to ask you: do you think? Because you mentioned the cultural differences. Do you think what perhaps some in the palace saw as bullying was just Meghan being American, being a bit more upfront, being a bit more out there? Or do you think there was actually a culture of bullying of staff? Because the two can be misinterpreted, can't they?
I definitely think that there is a clash, and just saying that she's American doesn't really explain it, because with Meghan you have two aspects of her sort of behaviour and cultural outlook, which I think British people typically misunderstand and which would have been at odds with palace culture. One is being Californian, which gives her all of the kind of touchy-feely language that people mock here or react against, whereas it's perfectly normal in California. And the other is the Hollywood system. And the Hollywood system, of course, is one where stars are in control. And if you have, as I suspect all of you had, done interviews with people who work in Hollywood, you have PR people hanging around telling you what questions you can't ask, and you have people expecting to be able to kind of snap their fingers and get things done. And some of the stuff that she was accused of, like the emails at all times of day and night. I mean,
we WhatsApp all day at night, especially you. Chris's WhatsApp game. Yeah. You can be WhatsApping us at like midnight, 1:30 in the morning, as though it's
forgetting that it's not normal for people to be messaging at that time. But, I mean, that's even different to an email, because an email can land at any time quite quietly on your PC, isn't it? But those
were among the allegations, and I'm not. So what I'm,
there were definitely
tensions. There were people who were bruised. I think she was bruised. It's not, but I don't. One of the other things I go into is, there is this inherent contradiction at the heart of this. Is like, anyone who is campaigning on these issues says kind of like believe women, and the problem here is that you have a lot of people who you can believe, but that's where I think you have to understand that something really did happen, but that there are also all sorts of mitigating circumstances and things that make it understandable. So also like the overstretched staffing, it was another thing, where they came in, or she came in, and then just the interest in her. You remember that, the level of interest, everybody wanted something with her. But in terms of the way the palace saw it, she was a fairly junior member of the team. And you remember when they were all sharing, the four of them, the supposed Fab Four, William and Kate and Harry and Meghan, were all sharing the same team.
Yes.
And then
that joke, not joke, do you ever argue?
That
Never a truer word said in jest.
But there's something to be
And you're right
said.
about the junior, because actually, look back at when Meghan joined, you had 4 households, effectively, Queen and Prince Philip, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall. Then you had William and Kate, Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as they were, and then Harry and Meghan. So when you say junior, she was actually, they as a couple were quite far down the list.
So when the junior person becomes the most popular person, that then causes rifts internally.
With Diana, of course.
Yes.
I mean, she was senior in that she was the Princess of Wales, but she wasn't the Queen at that point. And she was outshining her husband. And
the Queen Elizabeth at the time, because remember the Queen Elizabeth in the 1970s or the 80s when Diana came along was a less popular figure than she was towards the end of her life.
Yes. So it's an incredibly hierarchical structure that does not know how to deal with these women who come in who look like they might be kind of bigger than the hole that's been made for them, and also who are more expressive.
Yeah, Meghan, when she married into the family, remember she was a independent, working, very successful woman in her own right that then had to fit into this system, and not just fit in, but fit in within a position. But those tensions that you speak of with staff, that was, one of the issues that sparked the conflict between William and Harry.
But it's almost like watching I don't know, my kids are sort of watching Disney film type things on Disney Plus. But, you have all those films regarding teenagers who, I don't know, if they do body swaps or what have you, and moving into an environment where you're in a palace of some capacity when you've just been living as a normal person. If anyone thought that transition was going to be easy, I think is absolutely kidding themselves. Any one of us suddenly going from living in our normal houses with our families to suddenly living within an institution, the rules and regulations you don't really understand.
You're saying Meghan should have watched more Disney films?
No, but I'm saying that we know that people don't assimilate immediately.
Yeah, of course.
We know that there's a period. By the end of the hour and a half Disney film, they now understand how it all works and everybody lives happily ever after. But in the interim, you see the struggles like Princess Bride, for instance, you see the struggles they go through to try and fit in. And yet with Meghan, they seem to have expected her to do that immediately and without any kind of a period of time where there would be the ups and downs, but completely expectedly.
But also I'd ask a question back, which is how many people marrying into that family have you seen live happily ever after? It really isn't an easy gig. And I mean, I don't think people are prepared for fame of any kind, but that's a particularly strange kind of fame. And again, even more so for the women. And women in the public eye have always more attention on their bodies than men do. But royal women, there's an added dimension to that, which is this weird institution. It can only recruit through marriage and childbirth. And therefore, the rules of privacy that apply to normal famous people kind of get eroded here. We are allowed to ask ridiculously intrusive questions about their reproductive processes, and it's a level of being pinioned there. And then the other thing is they don't get to speak for themselves, as we know. So it's a terrible kind of fame. I mean, you really do need your head examined to, that's where the Disney aspect's a bit kind of dangerous.
You kind of think, did Harry talk Meghan through this at the beginning? Did anyone at the palace say, okay, right, let's sit down. This ain't going to be easy. But
you think Harry would have been good at telling her? I mean, he was born into this.
Yeah.
So, like, who is it you're going to find who's going to tell her? But even if you told her, I mean, that's in my biography of Charles, I try and explain the rules by which Planet Windsor operates and the stuff that just like completely puzzled me or made me laugh my head off. But I could laugh my head off because I didn't have to live there.
Yeah.
It's like I discovered that among his female staff there was a competition to see who could curtsy lowest without falling over. That's just fantastic. But that's the kind of thing people do when they're in this
life.
But it's why William and Kate, it's why it took so long for them to get engaged, because he really wanted her to understand what it was, what his life was and what her life could be. And I think they have really tried to find a balance where she can be happy. I think they have worked really hard.
But they had a longer time to work it out.
Definitely.
They met when they were at university. Yeah. And also there's something to be said for you being raised in a country where you have a monarchy.
Yeah.
Yes, you may not understand the ins and outs of it, but you gain an understanding of exactly what it means to other people and what it means culturally within a country.
Yes.
She also has that advantage. But yes, there was no rush. It wasn't like she was a woman in her late 30s who has to really think hard about finding someone and having a kid. She was in her teens, her late teens when they met. So I think it is very different. But one thing, but we don't really know. I think we know more possibly about Meghan as a person than we do necessarily about Kate as a person. And this is one thing that you talk about in the book as well, is you mentioned it a little bit earlier, you're not allowed to have your own opinions or even show who you are. And that would have been something that Kate had to learn over time, and which Meghan was expected to learn in a very short amount of time, because I would argue...
And had already been doing it before.
Exactly.
Which is a big difference, isn't it? Had already had that platform at the United Nations. She already had her own career. She had her own website. She did a lot of those things before. And then suddenly to be told, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Kate didn't have that in the same way.
No, because we don't really know Kate, do we, Lizzie? I would argue her as a person.
I think, Meghan was already famous in her own right. Did Kate want to be famous? Would Kate have been famous in any other circumstance? That probably wasn't where she wanted to be, but that's the life that she has entered by marrying William
and choosing to.
And I think she has very cautiously entered this world, and we have seen her grow in the role, and we have got to know her. But do we know as much about her as we do Meghan? Or
didn't I hear
probably
you
not.
In a conversation the other day calling Kate an enigma, because there is a lot about her we don't know, and which is surprising given that she's going to be in the not too distant future the Queen Consort.
But there have been moments where I think she did a podcast a few years ago with Giovanna Fletcher, and I remember sitting and listening to that and thinking, gosh, that is a really that's one of the most open I've ever heard
and
Kate be. She's definitely guarded and measured about how much she gives, but I think she's kind of very much drawn a line between her public and her private.
Did we know too much about Meghan? Is that part of the problem?
I mean, I think that again, the Californianness comes in there, because that is literally seen as a value there. If you're in the Hollywood system or the TV system, as you know, kind of you also play a short game. You play a game of quick wins in PR terms, where you come out with sort of things that are headline grabbing. Kate is this extraordinary player of the long game, which is the thing that works within the royal system.
And Camilla, I was going to say there, when you talk about playing the long game.
Oh, Camilla's the arch player of the long game.
Right.
I mean, just astonishing. But where it is playing within the system, and that means absolutely not sort of responding if there's something you don't like or trying to kind of set the agenda, but instead just building this image over time. But I think, what I'm not certain of, I agree we don't know much about her. She and William have done another kind of extraordinary thing, which is, although there are people who, as we know, brief the press on their behalf, they only do it when that is clearly in some way innate, agreed that they should do that. And they do not have anybody in their orbit who will go and talk to the press, which means that there are all sorts of things that we don't know about them. Having said all of which, I have a feeling there isn't that much to know about them. I think that there probably isn't that much of a gap between what you see. I don't think of them as people who would have like a strong interior life with many opinions struggling to get out. One of the things that fascinated me with Charles when he was a young man, and you'd see it in his explosive manner of speech, as he was always trying to not say things, and you felt that there was somebody with
passion,
and it came out in his memos, and it came out in he had views on everything.
When you look at King Charles and previously when he was Prince of Wales, there's a depth of knowledge and interest in pretty much everything. Yeah. Let's be clear, sort of a passion and energy to find out more. And I agree, you don't see that in the current Prince of Wales and Princess of Wales.
I mean, publicly, it's probably fair to say that Princess of Wales has never really put a foot wrong. And they have created this, they've got a group of friends and family around them that are incredibly protective. They don't talk to the press. They don't leak stuff to the press.
Yeah.
And that is an amazing thing that they've managed to build. I think if you were to ask them, do they have views, their argument would be, that they want to use those positions to have as much impact as possible in the areas that they really care about.
So you can say that, but you can within you still have a passion to be frustrated by the opinions that you can't share. And as you were saying, Catherine, I can, in all the archive that we see of King Charles when he was Prince Charles, you can see that, and the passion with which he speaks, the type of projects, the passion projects that he took on.
Ahead of his time on recognising the importance of Islam, climate change. On so many areas he was...
Architecture.
Dry stone walls.
Yes.
Dry stone walls. And the one that our favourite one, horse logging. Which we went to see him do once when he was celebrating the anniversary of being Prince of Wales, which is because you can't get machinery into the middle of the wood. You use horses to sort of pull the... And he's, guess what, patron of the Horse Logging Society. But it's the kind of thing you never knew about, but he did.
Yes, and you knew what he stood for. So you knew what he stood for without him saying too much, but I would argue that when you look at the comparison between Meghan and Kate, which the papers do virtually daily to the point of obsession, you could say you know what Meghan stands for, but perhaps more so because of her previous life, rather than when she became a member of the royal family, because she shut down the TIG and all of that stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely true. She's been able to give her opinion on things. She continues to give her opinion on things. But there are two things. One is, just to be clear, I'm not being critical of Kate in saying that I don't think she... No, but it's worth making that clear. I'm just saying she's a different personality type. And... it's not that the most relaxed interview I've ever seen with them is the one they did with Mike Tyndall, where they're talking about sport, and they clearly care about sport, and they're very competitive, all of that stuff, But I just think it's a very different mindset. But in terms of what they stand for, one of the things that happens to royal women is they get co-opted to stand for sets of values which may or may not reflect them accurately. And it is very useful in our polarised culture wars era for the purveyors of disinformation, but also people who are either sort of progressive or prosecuting the war against woke, to hang those values on the different teams, as it were, and then pit them against each other. And that doesn't mean that it's who they are at all. It means they're being projected on.
I remember an aide saying to us very early on when Meghan sort of joined the royal family, they said, just you watch. Meghan and Kate will be pitted against each other publicly. That's what'll happen. But do you think that Kate and William have sort of taken more of the late Queen's approach, which is, you know, I know when we talk about Charles when he was Prince of Wales as maybe being more overtly opinionated, I think they're probably following the model more of the late Queen. But I think they think that they're progressive and have ideas about how to modernise the monarchy and change things, but just maybe aren't needing to sort of shout about that, to just do it gradually and guide that change.
I think that's almost certainly true, but that there's something I describe in the book about the difference there. Whereas with the Queen, I had lunch with her once, and I saw her get very passionate about horses, as you know, that was her passion. And with Kate, with whom I've had very little contact, but I did try and have a conversation with her about the thing that's supposed to be her great passion, art. And I couldn't draw her out at all. And that was when I started thinking, oh, this is really interesting, because normally with most people you'll find one thing. And then I thought, well, actually art is very political. And maybe this is a kind of inherent caution. I think one of the reasons she has not put a foot wrong, as you put it, is that she has a real kind of, I don't think she wanted to be famous. She shows no sign of sort of loving the limelight. And she doesn't seem to want to spill,
She doesn't. And I think having taken on this role and having, she is one of the most famous women in the world. She's always does anything here and she's pretty much on a front page. And I think she has embraced it and adapted to it, but I don't think necessarily she wanted it.
No, and when we think about the way in which the press talked about her at the start of their relationship in a very derogatory way, a not very kind way, and by playing the long game, she now has the types of headlines that she has now. But then at the start, social media wasn't a thing when they first started going out. And now we have a situation where social media is involved in discussing them daily. And this kind of way in which they discuss the women is very different from the way that they discuss the men online. And there was a bit in the book, because I remember the picture where it was Meghan wore a Northwestern University jumper. Yeah. And people were comparing it to Diana wearing the same jumper.
Supposedly.
Yeah, and the words were, this is social media, so, I'm not defaming anyone. They wrote it on social media. And they said, that may be Meghan's most pathetic attempt yet at cosplaying Harry's mother. She is completely psychotic now. Over a jumper. And the thing that they missed out of all of that, Catherine, was Meghan was a Northwestern alumna with a degree in international relations.
And Diana wasn't, by the way.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things where
people lose their minds in a really weird way.
Yeah. But people absolutely lose their minds, and that's on both sides of the divide as well. And they become incredibly abusive in ways that make no sense whatsoever, because if they think they are defending the people that they supposedly represent, they're actually damaging them by increasing the temperature. But also, if they are monarchists, the monarchy is supposed to unite, and by creating these huge wedges, they're complicating that job. But obviously the Sussex Squad does it too, and I'm sure you've all been on the receiving end of that. But the thing about this is that people really also don't understand is it's not just the architecture of social media platforms that amplifies division and anger and hatred. There are people out there who are leaping on these divisive issues. And there was this thing fairly recently when Kate briefly had a hair colour a bit more like mine. Apparently this colour is called blonde. And it suddenly sort of gave rise to this whole thing about whether she was wearing a wig and whether she'd really had mad conspiracy theories. Yeah. But when I looked at it closely, it was really obvious that a lot of it was automated. I found, for example, one Twitter user who had been tweeting exclusively about Gaza and suddenly switched to Kate's hair, and there were more than 50 tweets per day from that one account. Now, that is... a lot of this stuff is coming from state actors who are not interested in any of these issues at all. They're not interested, then they may not even be interested in Gaza. They're certainly not interested in Kate's hair. But what they're doing is they're trying to confuse us about what's true. And they're trying to make us angry and polarised because that undermines democracy.
But isn't that aided by those who are not unnamed social media users? A lot of the vitriol and what have you, I would argue, is encouraged by media, legal media platforms here, online newspapers, for example, commentators. Yeah. You've got people who will speak with like practically venom spitting from their mouths about the royal family. And then you speak to them afterwards and they can just be like,
but they know that the more vitriol the more money they make, the more bookings, the more
followers they get.
Exactly.
And the phrase that I have in the book is the economy of hate.
Yes.
And
the economy of hate.
It absolutely is that. I mean, I remember being on a radio show with this woman who went, I just can't forgive Harry, and it was about his, and I accidentally, I hadn't had much sleep, and I went, it's not your job to forgive him. You're supposed to be a journalist. But, I really want to say that to those people masquerading as journalists who are actually just prosecuting stupid culture wars and defaming people. It's not clever. It's not pretty. Yes, it probably
and there was the whole thing
profitable.
You wrote about it in the book, didn't you? The whole thing about Meghan and Kate did very similar things, but the way it was written about with Kate, the bump, isn't it? She's caressing her bump because she's going to be such a wonderful mother, and for Meghan, it was why she's always drawing attention to her bump. What's wrong with her? I mean,
well, and that's where the sort of issues of race and being being from another country and all those things also play into it. But it's also where that's very interesting to me to ask, in terms of Kate not having put a foot wrong, absolutely right. But when she was not putting a foot wrong, at one point she was being called the Duchess of Drab. I think it also shows you how these narratives are susceptible to whatever is needed or desired by these outside forces. I think part of Kate's popularity does rely on it's not that she wanted it. She certainly won't have done. It's been horrible for all of them. But that seesaw that they put the women on does work. But the point about that seesaw is it can go the other way, and it almost always does. Which is, by the way, why Camilla's such an astonishing story, because
it's like the world's forgotten that at one point, I think some newspapers are calling her the most hated woman in the world. And here we are in 2026. In terms of great PR moves, she is, and her team have been incredible.
And she's worked really hard at that. She's endured hideous headlines. And I think, she has put her head down, found the causes that she cares about, and she's just got on with the job. And she's, done that without reacting. And Kate's done the same. She had the headlines, and she's just quietly got on with the job.
Oh yeah, but the headlines with Camilla, they were astonishing back in the day. They weren't holding back at all, were they, Catherine?
No, and also the ad hominem insults about her appearance. The comparison of women. It's like I think I used some phrase about comparing her and Diana like heifers at a county fair. The pound for pound. Which one would you rather have? Yeah. And but they were horrible to Diana too.
They were also horrible to Diana.
I mean, the day Diana died, the thing in the paper saying it's a pity Gucci didn't make face zips. There is just a level of misogyny in all of this, but there is also this level of predictability in which the women are pitted against each other. And, as I say, I just really want people to understand that it matters, that we shouldn't allow ourselves to be pulled into this, because it is being orchestrated. This isn't a conspiracy theory. There is ample evidence out there, both about, state interference and other organised interference in what we think. But also we see otherwise perfectly sane people becoming, sort of werewolves. I had that the whole time I was writing this book. I'd go around to see friends who would claim that they were completely bored by the royals and didn't understand why I was doing it.
And then grill you for an hour about them, probably.
No, well, at one point I found myself watching With Love Meghan with a whole load of people shouting at the television.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Why?
It's almost like
How many episodes did you get through? All of them?
I did, yes.
Well done.
Well, presumably she had to for the book.
Presumably, you also have.
Exactly.
Yes.
this programme.
I've watched at least some of every episode.
But have you made any of the recipes?
No.
That's true. Actually, you haven't.
No.
You should do that.
Maybe that could be one of our summer series episodes.
Summer series.
Chris in the kitchen. Chris cooks.
I could bring my flour sprinkles in. I mean, has anyone else in this room got a pot of flour sprinkles?
No, because you kept them for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't used them. They're unused, actually. You can put them in your tea or something.
Oh, well, I'll try that.
It would elevate the everyday.
Oh, that's like your favourite phrase of the year. But that's all we've got time for now. Don't forget to subscribe to the Talking Royals YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this very special Talking Royals Summer Series episode. Bye-bye.